The desert sun blazed overhead as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her rifle scope for the 100th time that morning. The SEAL team had been positioned on the rocky ridge overlooking the enemy compound for 3 hours, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Intelligence reports indicated that 3 high-ranking enemy generals would be meeting inside the fortified building below, discussing plans that could cost thousands of American lives. Commander Jake Mitchell crouched beside Maria, his weathered face showing the strain of leading countless dangerous missions. At 42, he had seen more combat than most soldiers twice his age. His reputation for bringing his team home safe was legendary, but today something felt different. The mission parameters had changed at the last minute, and now they were relying on precision shooting rather than their usual close-quarters approach. Maria had joined the team 6 months ago, fresh from sniper school where she had broken every accuracy record in the books. Despite her impressive credentials, some of the veteran SEALs still questioned whether a 26-year-old woman belonged in their elite unit. The doubt wasn't personal. It was the natural skepticism that came with life-or-death situations where trust had to be earned through fire. The compound below buzzed with activity. Enemy soldiers moved in predictable patterns, their routines mapped out by the team's reconnaissance over the past week. The main building stood 3 stories tall, its concrete walls scarred from previous conflicts. Intelligence suggested the generals would meet in the top-floor conference room, but the windows were small and the angles challenging. Through his binoculars, Commander Mitchell spotted movement in the target window. 3 figures in military dress uniforms had entered the room, their gold insignia glinting in the sunlight. These were the men responsible for coordinating attacks that had killed dozens of coalition forces over the past year. Today's meeting was supposed to finalize plans for a major offensive that would put thousands more lives at risk. Maria's breathing steadied as she acquired her targets through the high-powered scope. The distance was manageable, 800 meters, but the wind conditions were tricky. Desert thermals created unpredictable air currents that could throw off even the most experienced marksman. She had studied weather patterns for days, learning how the heat affected bullet trajectory in this particular terrain. The first general, a heavy-set man with a thick mustache, stood near the window, gesturing animatedly. Through intercepted communications, the team knew him as General Nazim, architect of several deadly roadside bombing campaigns. The second figure was younger, lean, and sharp-featured. General Qasim had earned his reputation through brutal interrogation techniques and civilian massacres. The third man remained partially obscured, but his uniform markings identified him as the most dangerous of all. Commander Mitchell felt the familiar weight of command pressing down on him. Every decision in the field carried life-or-death consequences, not just for the enemy but for his own team. Standard protocol called for calling in an airstrike, but the compound sat too close to a civilian neighborhood. Collateral damage was unacceptable, making precision shooting their only viable option. He glanced at Maria, noting her steady hands and controlled breathing. Her technical skills were undeniable, but combat shooting differed vastly from range practice. The psychological pressure of taking human lives, especially at such a distance where targets appeared as tiny figures through a scope, could affect even seasoned snipers. Some shooters froze when the moment came. Others rushed their shots, letting adrenaline override their training. The wind picked up, rustling the sparse vegetation around their position. Maria made minute adjustments to her scope, accounting for the changing conditions. Her spotter, Corporal Danny Rodriguez, whispered wind speed and direction readings through his measuring equipment. The two had trained together extensively, developing the seamless communication essential for long-range precision shooting. Movement in the compound caught everyone's attention. More enemy soldiers were taking positions around the perimeter, their weapons ready. The team's window of opportunity was narrowing rapidly. If they waited much longer, the increased security would make extraction nearly impossible. The nearest friendly forces were 40 kilometers away, too far to provide immediate support if things went wrong. Maria's finger rested lightly on the trigger guard, her training keeping her from applying pressure until the shot was authorized. She had practiced this scenario countless times, but never with 3 simultaneous targets. The generals stood close together, making the shot sequence critical. Any hesitation between shots would allow the survivors to take cover, eliminating future opportunities. Through her earpiece, Maria heard updates from the team's communications specialist. Satellite imagery showed additional enemy reinforcements approaching from the east. Their convoy kicked up dust clouds visible from orbit. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, putting additional pressure on the mission's timing. Commander Mitchell made his decision. The risk of waiting outweighed the uncertainty of the shot. These three generals had orchestrated attacks that killed hundreds of coalition forces and thousands of civilians. Their elimination would save countless lives and disrupt enemy operations for months. But success depended entirely on Maria's ability to deliver under pressure. He studied her profile one more time, looking for any sign of hesitation or doubt. What he saw was pure focus, the kind of concentration that separated elite soldiers from ordinary ones. Her breathing remained steady, her grip relaxed but firm. Every aspect of her posture demonstrated textbook shooting form, exactly as she had been trained. The moment of truth approached as the three generals gathered near the window, their animated discussion making them perfect targets. Intelligence intercepts suggested they were finalizing attack plans that would launch within days. This might be the only chance to stop them before hundreds more soldiers and civilians paid the ultimate price. Maria's scope crosshairs settled on the first target. The technical aspects of the shot were well within her capabilities, but the human element remained the unknown factor. Taking 3 lives in rapid succession required not just physical skill, but psychological preparation that no amount of training could fully simulate. The desert wind calmed to almost nothing, creating ideal shooting conditions that might not last long. Commander Mitchell raised his hand, ready to give the authorization that would change everything. In seconds, they would discover whether his faith in Maria's abilities was justified, or whether his doubts about the mission's feasibility had been correct all along. Commander Mitchell's hand dropped, giving the silent authorization. Maria's world narrowed to the small circle visible through her scope. Years of training had prepared her for this moment, but nothing could fully simulate the reality of combat shooting. The weight of 3 lives, and potentially thousands more, rested on her trigger finger. Her first target, General Nazim, stood perfectly framed in the window, his bulky silhouette making him the easiest shot. Through intercepted radio chatter, the team knew he was describing plans for a massive truck bomb attack on a coalition base, housing over 2,000 soldiers. His death would immediately save those lives, but Maria tried not to think about the human element. Focus on technique, not consequences. That was how snipers stayed effective. The crosshairs settled on the center mass of Nazim's chest. Maria's breathing slowed to almost nothing, her heart rate dropping as her training took over. The rifle felt like an extension of her body, perfectly balanced and familiar. She had fired this exact weapon thousands of times in practice, learning its unique characteristics and preferences. The first shot rang out across the desert, the sound echoing off distant rocks. Through her scope, Maria saw General Nazim collapse immediately, his body dropping out of view. No time to confirm the kill. The second target was already moving. Alarmed by the gunshot but not yet understanding its source, General Qassem spun toward the window, his lean face showing confusion rather than fear. The desert's acoustics made it difficult to pinpoint the shooter's location, buying Maria precious seconds. She shifted her aim smoothly, her movements economical and practiced. The second crosshairs found their mark just as Qassem started to duck away from the window. The second shot followed less than 3 seconds after the first. Qassem jerked backward, his body twisting as the high-velocity round found its target. 2 down, 1 to go, but the third general had disappeared from view. Maria's scope swept the window frantically, searching for the final target while enemy soldiers below began scrambling for defensive positions. Corporal Rodriguez whispered urgently through his spotting scope, tracking movement inside the building. The third general, the most dangerous of the 3, had dropped to the floor but was still alive and mobile. Through thermal imaging, Rodriguez could see his heat signature crawling away from the window, trying to reach safety deeper in the building. Maria's jaw tightened with frustration. 2 perfect shots meant nothing if the primary target escaped. General Hassan al-Rashid was the mastermind behind the enemy's most sophisticated operations. His survival would mean the deaths of countless coalition forces and civilians. The mission's success depended entirely on eliminating all 3 targets. Commander Mitchell felt his doubts resurging as seconds ticked by without a third shot. The enemy compound below was erupting into chaos, soldiers running in all directions as they tried to locate the sniper's position. Soon they would organize a proper response, sending teams to sweep the surrounding ridges. The SEAL team's extraction window was closing rapidly. Through the team's communications network, updates flowed in from their overwatch positions. Enemy vehicles were mobilizing throughout the area, their radio chatter indicating a coordinated search for the shooters. Helicopter engines could be heard in the distance, though whether they were friend or foe remained unclear. Every second of delay increased the team's exposure to discovery and retaliation. Maria forced herself to remain calm despite the mounting pressure. Panic was the enemy of precision, and rushed shots often meant missed targets. She continued scanning the building through her scope, looking for any sign of the third general. Heat shimmer from the desert floor made observation difficult, distorting images and creating false movement signatures. Then she saw him. General al-Rashid had reached another window on the building's east side, his distinctive uniform visible for just a moment as he peered outside. The angle was more challenging than the previous shots, requiring Maria to adjust her position slightly. She had perhaps 5 seconds before he would disappear again, this time potentially for good. The new shooting position felt awkward, her rifle barrel angled at an uncomfortable degree. The distance remained the same, but the wind conditions had changed slightly. Maria made rapid calculations in her head, adjusting for the altered trajectory and environmental factors. There would be no second chance. This shot had to be perfect. Rodriguez fed her updated wind readings through his equipment, his voice steady despite the deteriorating tactical situation. Enemy soldiers were beginning to look in their direction, though they hadn't yet pinpointed the team's exact location. Muzzle flashes from the previous shots had given general bearing, but the rocky terrain provided multiple potential hiding spots. Commander Mitchell watched through his binoculars as enemy reinforcements continued arriving at the compound. What had started as a precision strike was rapidly becoming a potential disaster. If Maria couldn't take the third shot soon, they would have to abort and extract immediately. Leaving al-Rashid alive meant mission failure and the certainty of future American casualties. The crosshairs found their target just as al-Rashid started to pull back from the window. Maria's finger squeezed the trigger with the same smooth motion she had practiced thousands of times. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, its recoil familiar and expected. Through her scope, she watched the third general's body jerk and fall backward into the room. 3 shots, 3 kills, all within 15 seconds. The enemy compound erupted into complete chaos as remaining soldiers realized their leadership had been eliminated. Without the general's coordination, their organized response began falling apart almost immediately. Lower-ranking officers struggled to take command, but confusion and fear dominated their actions. Commander Mitchell felt a surge of relief mixed with professional admiration. Maria had delivered under extreme pressure, demonstrating the skills and composure that made the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. His doubts about her capabilities had been completely unfounded. She had performed exactly as her training records indicated she would, but celebration would have to wait. Enemy forces were still searching for their position, and extraction remained the most dangerous phase of any mission. The team began their planned withdrawal, moving quickly but carefully through the rocky terrain. Maria disassembled her rifle with practiced efficiency, erasing evidence of their shooting position. As they moved toward their extraction point, radio intercepts confirmed the impact of Maria's shooting. All 3 enemy generals were dead, their coordinated attack plans dying with them. Intelligence estimates suggested the disruption would save hundreds of coalition lives and set back enemy operations by months. The mission had been a complete success, achieved through precision rather than overwhelming force. The SEAL team moved through the rocky terrain with practiced stealth, every footstep calculated to avoid loose stones that might betray their position. Maria carried her disassembled rifle in a specialized pack, its components secured against rattling or damage during the extraction movement. Behind them, the enemy compound continued buzzing with confused activity as soldiers searched desperately for their invisible attackers. Commander Mitchell led the withdrawal, his GPS unit guiding them toward the predetermined extraction point 3 kilometers away. The route took them through a maze of dried creek beds and boulder fields, terrain that provided excellent concealment but slowed their movement considerably. Every minute they remained in the area increased their chances of discovery and engagement. Through their communication headsets, the team monitored enemy radio traffic. The confusion in the compound was complete. Junior officers argued about response procedures while enlisted soldiers ran in circles, unsure what actions to take. The systematic elimination of their command structure had created exactly the chaos the mission planners had hoped for. Maria felt the adrenaline beginning to fade, replaced by the strange emptiness that often followed intense combat. 3 human beings were dead because of her actions, a reality that would require processing later. For now, survival took priority over psychological reflection. The mission's success meant nothing if the team couldn't reach safety. The terrain began changing as they moved away from the compound. Rocky ridges gave way to sandy flats dotted with sparse vegetation. This area offered less concealment, but allowed faster movement toward their rendezvous point. Intelligence reports suggested enemy patrols rarely ventured this far from their main base. But assumptions could prove fatal in hostile territory. Rodriguez provided rear security, occasionally dropping behind to observe their back trail through his spotting scope. His job was ensuring they weren't being followed, using the same observation skills that had made him invaluable during the shooting sequence. So far, no organized pursuit had materialized, though individual search teams were visible in the distance. The extraction helicopter was scheduled to arrive in 27 minutes, but desert flying conditions could easily delay their pickup. Sandstorms, engine problems, or enemy air defenses might force the crew to abort, leaving the SEAL team to execute their emergency extraction plan. That scenario involved a much longer overland movement to an alternate pickup zone, 40 kilometers away. Commander Mitchell checked his watch again, calculating their movement speed against the remaining distance. They were making good time despite the challenging terrain, but comfort margins in special operations were measured in seconds, not minutes. One wrong turn or unexpected obstacle could transform mission success into complete disaster. The team's medic, Petty Officer Sarah Chen, monitored everyone's physical condition during the movement. Desert operations placed enormous stress on human bodies, even those in peak physical condition. Dehydration, heat exhaustion, and simple fatigue could compromise decision-making and reaction times when they were needed most. Maria's thoughts kept returning to the 3 shots she had fired. Each one had been technically perfect, exactly as she had trained to deliver them. The human cost was something she would have to reconcile with her conscience later. But intellectually, she understood the mathematics of warfare. 3 enemy deaths prevented hundreds of coalition casualties and potentially thousands of civilian fatalities. Enemy helicopter sounds grew louder in the distance, indicating their pursuers were escalating search efforts. The aircraft appeared to be following search patterns rather than direct pursuit routes, suggesting they still hadn't pinpointed the team's location. This was encouraging, but helicopters could cover ground much faster than personnel on foot. The team reached a checkpoint in their route, a distinctive rock formation that marked their halfway point to extraction. Commander Mitchell called a brief halt to assess their situation and confirm their position. The GPS coordinates matched perfectly with their planned route, and no immediate threats were visible in any direction. During the pause, Maria cleaned sand from her rifle scope and checked her ammunition inventory. Habits ingrained through countless training exercises continued, even when the immediate shooting was finished. Weapons maintenance was second nature to professional soldiers, a routine that continued regardless of circumstances. Rodriguez reported movement on their back trail, a search team approximately 2 kilometers behind, moving slowly but in their general direction. The pursuit wasn't organized or purposeful yet, but it represented a potential threat that required monitoring. If the searchers found their trail, the team's extraction could become significantly more complicated. The decision was made to continue movement toward the extraction point while maintaining careful observation of the pursuing force. Changing routes now would risk missing their helicopter pickup, but allowing enemy soldiers to get too close would compromise their escape options. The balance between speed and stealth became critical. Maria shouldered her pack and checked her personal weapon, a compact assault rifle optimized for close-quarters engagement. While her sniper rifle was designed for long-range precision, this weapon provided firepower, If the team encountered enemy forces during their withdrawal, every SEAL carried multiple weapon systems, each suited for different tactical situations. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, creating long shadows that could aid concealment, but also distort distance perception. Desert twilight was notorious for playing tricks on human vision, making accurate target identification challenging. This worked both ways. Enemy searchers would face the same visual difficulties. Communication with their extraction helicopter crackled through the team's radio system. The aircraft was airborne and proceeding toward their position, with an estimated arrival time matching their planned schedule. Weather conditions remained favorable for the pickup, with minimal wind and good visibility expected. As they continued moving, Commander Mitchell reflected on Maria's performance during the mission. His initial doubts had been based on experience rather than prejudice. He had seen skilled shooters fail under combat pressure, and the mission's success had depended entirely on precision shooting. Maria had not only met expectations but exceeded them, delivering 3 perfect shots under extremely challenging conditions. The team's movement through the desert continued methodically, each step bringing them closer to safety. Behind them, the enemy compound gradually faded into the heat haze, its confused occupants still searching for attackers who had vanished like ghosts. The precision strike had achieved its objectives with minimal collateral damage and maximum psychological impact. Rodriguez provided another update on their pursuers. The search team had stopped at the original shooting position, probably trying to analyze the evidence left behind. This delay was beneficial, providing additional separation between the SEAL team and their potential captors. Every minute of distance made their extraction more secure and successful. The distinctive sound of rotor blades echoed across the desert as their extraction helicopter approached the designated landing zone. Commander Mitchell felt the familiar mixture of relief and alertness that accompanied successful mission completion. They weren't safe until they were airborne and heading home, but the appearance of their ride meant the most dangerous phase was nearly over. Maria crouched behind a low sand dune, scanning the surrounding area through her rifle scope one final time. The extraction zone had been chosen for its tactical advantages: clear fields of fire in all directions, multiple escape routes, and terrain that favored defenders over attackers. Still, helicopter landings represented vulnerable moments when teams were exposed and partially immobilized. The pilot's voice crackled through their communication system, confirming visual contact with the team and beginning his approach sequence. The aircraft was a specially modified Black Hawk, equipped with advanced defensive systems and crewed by pilots who specialized in high-risk extractions. These aviators had pulled SEAL teams out of impossible situations throughout their careers. Rodriguez maintained his rear guard position, tracking the enemy search teams through his spotting equipment. The pursuers had split into smaller groups, spreading their search pattern wider but reducing their individual strength. This tactical decision worked in the SEAL team's favor, making it less likely they would encounter a large enemy force during extraction. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of swirling sand, its engines maintaining flight-ready power settings. The crew chief gestured for the team to board quickly, his experienced eyes scanning for threats while the aircraft remained vulnerable on the ground. Every second spent stationary increased their exposure to enemy fire or rocket attacks. Commander Mitchell counted his people as they sprinted toward the aircraft. Maria moved with the same fluid precision she had demonstrated during the shooting sequence, her gear secured and her weapon ready for immediate use. The months of doubt about her field performance seemed ridiculous now. She operated like a veteran with years of combat experience. The team piled into the helicopter's cargo compartment, strapping themselves into crash-worthy seats as the aircraft lifted off immediately. The pilot banked sharply away from the extraction zone, keeping low to avoid radar detection while building distance from potential threats. Within seconds, they were racing across the desert at maximum speed. Maria allowed herself a moment of exhaustion as the adrenaline finally began subsiding. The mission had lasted less than 6 hours from insertion to extraction, but the psychological intensity made it feel much longer. 3 carefully placed shots had eliminated enemy leadership and disrupted operations that could have killed hundreds of coalition forces. Through the helicopter's windows, the enemy compound appeared as a tiny cluster of buildings in the distance. Smoke was visible from several locations, suggesting the confusion following the general's deaths had led to additional chaos. Intelligence reports would later confirm that the power vacuum had triggered internal conflicts among surviving enemy officers. Commander Mitchell removed his helmet and wiped sweat from his forehead, finally allowing himself to acknowledge the mission's complete success. The precision strike had achieved every objective while avoiding civilian casualties or coalition losses. These were the operations that made the difference in modern warfare. Surgical strikes that eliminated threats without massive collateral damage. The helicopter's communication system provided updates on regional enemy activity. Several search helicopters were airborne, but they were concentrating their efforts around the original compound rather than pursuing the extraction aircraft. This suggested the enemy still hadn't determined the attacker's escape route or identified their extraction method. Rodriguez began the process of mission documentation, photographing evidence and recording details while they remained fresh in everyone's memory. After-action reports were critical for improving future operations and validating intelligence assessments. Maria's shooting performance would be analyzed in detail, providing lessons for other sniper teams. The flight path took them over terrain that gradually changed from desert to agricultural areas, indicating their progress toward friendly territory. Each mile covered reduced the threat from enemy ground forces, though air defenses remained a concern until they reached coalition-controlled airspace. The pilot maintained low altitude and high speed to minimize exposure time. Maria stared out at the landscape below, processing the events of the past few hours. She had joined the SEAL teams to make a difference in the war against terrorism, and today's mission represented exactly the kind of precise, effective action she had hoped to contribute. 3 enemy generals would never again plan attacks against innocent people. The helicopter's crew chief provided an estimated time to their forward operating base, 37 minutes of flight time remaining. The base offered hot meals, secure communications, and medical facilities if needed. More importantly, it represented safety and the opportunity to decompress after the intensity of combat operations. Commander Mitchell began mentally composing his mission report, highlighting the exceptional performance of his team members. Maria's shooting had been flawless under extreme pressure, validating her selection for the unit and silencing any remaining doubts about women in combat roles. Skills and dedication mattered more than gender in special operations. The radio crackled with intelligence updates about the mission's impact. Intercepted enemy communications confirmed all 3 generals were dead, and their command structure was in complete disarray. Several planned attacks had been canceled due to the leadership vacuum, potentially saving hundreds of lives in the coming weeks. Rodriguez packed away his spotting equipment, securing it against the helicopter's vibrations. The precision instruments required careful handling to maintain their accuracy, and proper maintenance was essential for future operations. Every piece of equipment had contributed to the mission's success and deserved appropriate care. As they flew towards safety, each team member began processing the mission in their own way. Combat affected everyone differently, and healthy psychological habits were essential for long-term effectiveness. Some soldiers preferred solitude, while others benefited from discussing their experiences with trusted teammates. Maria felt a quiet satisfaction in her performance, tempered by awareness of the human cost involved. 3 families would mourn tonight because of her actions, but hundreds of other families would never know they had been saved. This moral complexity was part of special operations. Sometimes preventing greater evil required accepting smaller evils. The helicopter continued its flight through increasingly friendly airspace, its crew and passengers carrying the satisfaction of mission accomplishment. Intelligence analysts would spend days evaluating the full impact of the general's elimination, but initial assessments suggested the disruption would last for months. Commander Mitchell looked around at his team, noting their professionalism and dedication. Operations like this one demonstrated why SEAL teams were considered among the world's elite military units. When conventional approaches failed, they provided surgical solutions to complex problems. The forward operating base appeared on the horizon, its lights visible against the darkening desert landscape. Soon they would be debriefing with intelligence officers, sharing details that would inform future operations. But for now, they could simply appreciate the satisfaction of a mission completed successfully against significant odds. The helicopter touched down at Forward Operating Base Phoenix, just as the desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Maria felt the solid ground beneath her boots and took her first truly relaxed breath since the mission began. The familiar sounds of military base operations, generators humming, vehicles moving, personnel calling out instructions, represented security and normalcy after hours of deadly precision work. Commander Mitchell led his team toward the debriefing facility, a hardened concrete structure designed to withstand rocket attacks and provide secure communications. Intelligence officers were already waiting with laptops, recording equipment, and detailed maps showing the target area. These specialists would extract every piece of useful information from the team's observations and experiences. The base's medical officer intercepted them before they reached the debriefing room, conducting quick health assessments to ensure everyone had handled the mission's physical and psychological stress appropriately. Desert operations took a toll on human bodies, and combat stress affected people in unpredictable ways. A few minutes of medical evaluation could prevent more serious problems later. Maria submitted to the routine medical check while her mind continued processing the day's events. The 3 shots she had fired would be analyzed from every possible angle: trajectory calculations, environmental factors, timing sequences, and psychological impact assessments. Her performance would become part of military databases used to train future snipers. The debriefing session began with Commander Mitchell providing an overview of the mission timeline and tactical decisions. Intelligence officers recorded every detail, occasionally asking for clarification or additional information. The enemy compound's layout, security procedures, and response patterns would be valuable for planning future operations in the region. Rodriguez provided detailed observations about enemy movements and communication, patterns he had monitored through his spotting equipment. His role as spotter made him equally responsible for the mission's success, and his technical expertise would be analyzed alongside Maria's shooting performance. Sniper teams succeeded or failed as integrated units, not individual performers. When Maria's turn came to describe her shooting sequence, she spoke with clinical precision about environmental conditions, target acquisition procedures, and technical challenges. The intelligence officers took notes on everything from wind measurements to psychological factors that might have affected her accuracy. Future training programs would incorporate these real-world lessons. The mission's immediate impact became clear through intelligence briefings that followed their debriefing session. Enemy communications intercepts showed complete chaos in their command structure, with junior officers arguing over authority and planned operations being canceled or postponed indefinitely. The 3 generals' elimination had created a power vacuum that would take months to fill. Base personnel treated the team with the quiet respect reserved for units that had completed exceptionally dangerous missions. Word of their success had spread quickly through military communication networks, earning recognition from senior commanders who understood the operation's strategic significance. Lives had been saved through precision rather than overwhelming force. The team's quarters were located in a secure section of the base, providing privacy for decompression and rest. Maria's room was spartanly furnished but comfortable, with a real bed, hot shower, and air conditioning. Luxuries after the desert's harsh environment. More importantly, it offered solitude for processing the psychological impact of taking human lives. Commander Mitchell found himself reflecting on his initial doubts about Maria's combat readiness. Her performance had been flawless under extreme pressure, demonstrating the kind of cool professionalism that separated elite soldiers from ordinary ones. His concerns had been based on experience rather than prejudice, but they had proven completely unfounded. The base dining facility provided the team's first hot meal since before the mission, a simple pleasure that felt luxurious after hours of combat rations and adrenaline-fueled tension. Normal conversations about sports, family news, and upcoming leave plans helped transition their minds away from the intensity of combat operations. Maria ate quietly, listening to her teammates' casual banter while processing her own thoughts about the mission. She had proven herself capable of performing under the most extreme circumstances, earning acceptance into one of the military's most exclusive communities. The doubts and skepticism she had faced were finally behind her. Evening briefings provided updates on the mission's continuing impact. Enemy forces throughout the region were reportedly in disarray, their coordinated activities disrupted by the leadership vacuum. Intelligence estimates suggested the general's elimination would prevent dozens of planned, attacks and save hundreds of coalition lives over the coming months. The base's chaplain made himself available for anyone who needed to discuss the psychological aspects of combat operations. Taking human lives, even enemy lives, created moral complexities that required careful processing. Some soldiers preferred religious counseling, while others worked through their feelings independently or with trusted teammates. Rodriguez cleaned and maintained his spotting equipment in the team's equipment room, following procedures that had become second nature through years of practice. Precision instruments required constant care to maintain their accuracy, and proper maintenance was essential for future mission success. The tools of warfare demanded the same attention as the people who used them. Commander Mitchell began composing his after-action report, documenting the mission's success and highlighting exceptional individual performances. Maria's shooting would be used as a textbook example of sniper effectiveness, while Rodriguez's spotting work demonstrated the importance of team coordination in precision shooting operations. The forward operating base settled into its nighttime routine as security patrols took their positions and defensive systems activated automated monitoring modes. For the SEAL team, this represented their first opportunity to truly relax since receiving their mission orders. The immediate dangers were past, though their work in the region would continue. Maria lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling while desert wind rattled the building's exterior walls. The 3 enemy generals were dead, their plans for mass casualties terminated with surgical precision. Hundreds of families would never know they had been saved by 3 carefully aimed shots, fired by a young woman whose abilities had been questioned just hours earlier. Sleep came slowly, as it often did after intense combat operations. The human mind required time to process extreme experiences, and Maria's subconscious worked through the day's events while she drifted toward rest. Tomorrow would bring new missions and challenges, but tonight she could rest with the knowledge that she had performed flawlessly when lives depended on her skills. The base's communication center continued monitoring intelligence reports throughout the night, tracking the ongoing impact of the mission. Enemy organizations throughout the region were struggling to maintain their operational capabilities without their senior leadership, creating opportunities for additional coalition operations against weakened targets. As the desert night deepened, the SEAL team slept with the satisfaction of professionals who had completed an exceptionally difficult mission without casualties or complications. Their precision strike had achieved strategic objectives while avoiding the collateral damage associated with conventional military operations. It was exactly the kind of surgical warfare that special operations units were designed to deliver. 3 months later, Maria stood at the podium in the Pentagon's secure briefing room, facing an audience of senior military officials and intelligence analysts. The mission that had begun with Commander Mitchell's doubts about her abilities had evolved into a case study taught throughout the special operations community. Her 3 precision shots had saved an estimated 400 coalition lives and prevented countless civilian casualties. The presentation screen behind her displayed satellite imagery of the enemy compound, now abandoned and partially destroyed by internal conflicts that followed the general's elimination. Without their leadership structure, the terrorist organization had fragmented into smaller, less effective groups that posed minimal strategic threats. The power vacuum had created exactly the chaos military planners had hoped to achieve. Commander Mitchell sat in the front row, his expression showing the pride of a leader whose team had exceeded every expectation. His initial concerns about Maria's combat readiness seemed almost ridiculous now, given her subsequent performance on 6 additional missions. She had become one of the unit's most reliable operators. Her precision shooting skills complemented by tactical intelligence and unshakable composure under fire. The briefing covered technical aspects of the shooting sequence, environmental factors that had influenced accuracy, and team coordination procedures that enabled success. Maria's clinical presentation style impressed the audience, demonstrating the analytical thinking that made her exceptional at both shooting and mission planning. Her expertise had been earned through performance, not just training scores. Intelligence officers provided updates on the mission's long-term impact during the second half of the briefing. The 3 eliminated generals had been replaced by less experienced commanders who lacked their predecessors' strategic vision and tactical expertise. Enemy operations throughout the region had become more fragmented and less effective, creating opportunities for additional coalition successes. After the formal presentation, Maria found herself surrounded by officers seeking details about sniper training programs and selection procedures. Her success had generated interest in expanding precision shooting capabilities throughout the military, with several units requesting similar training for their personnel. The demonstration effect of one successful mission rippled through entire organizations. Rodriguez had been promoted and assigned to a training position, where he would teach spotting techniques to new sniper teams. His role in the mission's success had been equally important to Maria's shooting, and his expertise would now benefit dozens of future operators. The partnership between shooter and spotter remained one of the most critical elements in precision operations. The Pentagon meeting concluded with discussions about incorporating the mission's lessons into official training curricula. Maria's performance under extreme pressure would be studied by military psychologists seeking to understand how some individuals thrived in high-stress situations while others struggled. Her case represented the ideal combination of technical skill and mental toughness. Later that evening, Maria walked through Arlington National Cemetery, visiting the graves of fallen soldiers whose deaths might have been prevented by successful missions like hers. The white headstones stretched endlessly across perfectly manicured lawns, each representing a life lost in service to their country. Her 3 shots had ensured that fewer new graves would be needed in the coming months. She paused at the tomb of the unknown soldier, watching the ceremonial guard maintain his precise movements despite cold rain beginning to fall. The dedication and precision required for that ceremonial duty paralleled the standards expected of special operations forces. Excellence demanded constant attention to detail, whether in combat or in honoring the fallen. The mission's impact continued expanding beyond its immediate tactical success. Intelligence gathered from the eliminated general's communications had revealed other enemy operations, leading to additional successful interventions by coalition forces. Maria's 3 shots had created a cascade effect that disrupted terrorist activities across multiple countries and potentially saved thousands of lives. Commander Mitchell had received his promotion to admiral, partly based on his unit's exceptional performance during the compound mission. His leadership style, which balanced healthy skepticism with trust in his subordinates' abilities, had become a model studied in military leadership courses. His initial doubts about Maria had transformed into complete confidence in her capabilities. Back at their home base, Maria continued training with the same intensity that had prepared her for that critical desert mission. Each practice session built upon lessons learned from real combat, refining techniques and developing new skills for future operations. The military's most elite units never stopped improving, knowing that enemies constantly adapted their own tactics. Her weapon locker now contained a custom rifle built specifically for her shooting style and physical characteristics. The precision instrument represented thousands of hours of practice and millions of dollars in research and development. But the most important component remained the human operator, who could deliver accurate fire under impossible conditions. The 3 enemy generals had been replaced, but their successors lacked the experience and strategic vision of their predecessors. Intelligence reports suggested the terrorist organization continued struggling with internal conflicts and reduced operational effectiveness. The precise elimination of key leadership had created long-term strategic advantages for coalition forces. Maria's success had opened doors for other women seeking positions in special operations units. Her performance had demolished arguments that gender affected combat effectiveness, proving that individual capability mattered more than demographic characteristics. Military organizations slowly adapted their policies to reflect these demonstrated realities. The desert compound where she had fired her 3 historic shots remained abandoned, its former occupants scattered to less significant roles throughout the region. Local populations had begun returning to areas previously controlled by the terrorist organization, their children attending schools and their families rebuilding lives interrupted by years of conflict. On quiet evenings, Maria sometimes reflected on the moment when Commander Mitchell had given her the authorization to fire. Those 3 shots had changed everything, not just for the mission's immediate objectives, but for her career, her unit's reputation, and potentially thousands of people whose lives had been saved by preventing planned attacks. The medal ceremonies and recognition events had been gratifying, but the true satisfaction came from knowing she had performed flawlessly when lives depended on her skills. Every hour of training, every practice shot, Every moment of doubt and determination had led to those critical seconds when precision meant the difference between success and catastrophe. Years later, when military historians analyzed the campaign against terrorism in that region, Maria's mission would be cited as a turning point where precision operations proved more effective than conventional military force. 3 shots fired by a young woman whose abilities had been questioned had achieved strategic objectives that might have required months of traditional warfare to accomplish. The SEAL community had fully embraced Maria as one of their elite operators, her gender becoming irrelevant compared to her demonstrated abilities. She had earned her place through performance rather than politics, setting a standard that would inspire future generations of special operations personnel regardless of their background or characteristics. Commander Mitchell often used their mission as an example when training new SEAL teams, emphasizing the importance of trusting subordinates' abilities while maintaining appropriate operational security. His initial doubts had been reasonable given the stakes involved, but Maria's performance had exceeded every expectation and delivered results that changed the strategic landscape. The 3 enemy generals had planned attacks that would have killed hundreds of coalition forces and thousands of civilians. Their elimination through precision shooting had prevented those tragedies, while avoiding the collateral damage associated with conventional military responses. It represented warfare at its most surgical and effective.